Thank you for joining. Earth Day is now, I think, in its 40-something year, beginning very locally in the States, expanding to apparently involve 1 million people across the world. That is 14.2% of the world's population in local and national activities. And we will focus very much on local in Israel and local in England, but what we say will apply across the globe. And it's important, action really matters, and also political action and lobbying really matters. And Shiri Atsmon, one of our speakers, was saying that she was at the protest in London yesterday with 60,000 people. So this matters more and more as we realize what's at stake for our future. I'm Rabbi Jonathan Wittenberg. I'm a co-founder of Eco-Judaism and work with Angelina Doherty on it and on the JTree project, which is the planting of trees in ecologically and ethically sustainable and honorable ways. And we're bringing that gradually now under into one site, whether the planting is in America, in Israel, in Britain, or in Africa. And please plant trees, please create meadows. We put different stories on the website. And I want to thank Angela for bringing together this program. The first part will be with Jay Shofet. We met recently in Israel, looking at birding and seeing some of the wonderful reserves that the Society for Protection of Nature in Israel has. It's the biggest NGO working on the environment in Israel, and Jay Shofet is the Director of Development. I'll just say one line. I'm asked as a rabbi, where is Earth Day in Judaism? And my answer is, where isn't it? The Torah begins with the wonder of creation. It permeates the Hebrew Bible. The rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud, they knew their flora, their fauna, their weather, their seasons. They were attached to the land. This is at the heart of Judaism, and it's essential to our future. Welcome to everybody, and Jay, over to you.
Well, thank you very much.
The plan is you'll present for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have a few minutes for questions to you. And then we're going to come to you, Shiri, and you'll again present for 10 to 15 minutes, and there'll be a chance for questions to you before we close. Thank you. Sorry, Jay, to interrupt you like that. Over to you.
No, not at all. Thank you very much, Rabbi Wittenberg. It's my pleasure to be here. Really an honor to hook up with you guys for Earth Day. I know that your own local organization, Echo Earth, and you have so many interesting things going on, and you personally have been such an eminent voice for Jewish stewardship of the environment in the UK and internationally with your writings. So it's really, really special for me to be here, and for also our
signing of volunteers, and I think that they're going to start being more of a stronger presence in the media than Donald Trump has.
Can we ask everybody to be sure to be on mute, please, apart from you, Jay? Thank you.
Yeah. Great, thank you. What was I saying? That I don't remember, but it was great meeting you in Israel recently and in London in the past, and it's important that we work together. The environment knows no borders, and environmentalists should know no borders. So it's great to have people on from all over. That's what I was saying before. I wanted to mention, people have asked, you're actually coming to us, I believe, from your home in London. And so we have, we do not see Jay on the screen. Is that somebody, we good here? Okay, so we have people, that joined our webinar. We do webinars on Sunday night a little earlier than this time for our American audience mostly, but also many people in the UK and some familiar faces from the UK here as well. So welcome everybody from SPNI around the globe, and happy to be involved with our friends and in the UK. So let me share a screen and go for a brief sort of webinar. Let me see, I'll make it big. Okay, So, oops, why are we at the end of it? That was weird. Okay. Okay. So, welcome everybody. I'm the development director and the director of international relations for SPNI, Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel. We are Israel's oldest, largest, and leading environmental NGO. We were founded as a protest to the draining of the Hula wetlands, the Hula Lake, actually, in the early 1950s in Israel. Our founders, some kibbutznikim and early environmentalists at the time in Israel, felt that it was a folly to drain wetlands in a freshwater lake in such an arid country like Israel. They were proven right. Israel partially reflooded the Hula. It's become a major birding spot and an incredible wetland. But meanwhile, SPNI is celebrating 70 years as Israel celebrates its 75th. And one of our mottos is educate, love, protect. We work on education, environmental education throughout Israeli society, all the sectors of Jews and Arabs, Bedouin, Druze, religious, secular, and some ultra-Orthodox. Kids are in our educational programs, formal and informal, all over Israel. We foster a love of nature through hiking. We blaze and maintain the trail system of Israel, including the Israel National Trail, considered one of the 10 iconic trails of the world by National Geographic, and a rite of passage for Israelis to hike. It's 1,100 kilometers from north to south. And we have a system of field schools that allow man and school children to interact with nature in these kind of youth hostel accommodations in nature. And we've been doing all these things. We pioneered all these things in Israel and to some degree globally. And the education and the love is really to get to what we really do, which is protect. We protect nature in Israel and regionally through all legal means, through our planning division and through lobbyists and through field scientists and ecologists who work in all the various habitats of Israel. And that's what we're going to talk about today, a little bit of that nature protection. And we've moved from defense to offense. And we're going to particularly talk about some of Israel's wetlands today and what's happened to them. And really, in the next 7 or 8 minutes, we're just going to flip through some facts about Israeli nature and what you need to know about it. And not so much. This is more on the macro level. I think Shiri afterwards is going to talk more on the micro level of what we can do about personally about Earth Day. But just to give you a little, some news from Israel that's not what you're hearing mostly, and some. A bright way to look at the future, because environmentalists are really the ones that are fighting right now in Israel and everywhere for the common ground, the resources and the ground and the spaces and the water that we all share. So we all know we're facing an environmental crisis, knows no borders. It's a twin environmental crisis, really, climate change and biodiversity loss. And this map shows the globe with about 4% of it designated as global biodiversity hotspots, according to the United Nations. Israel, in the tiny little center there, is one of those hotspots. And it is particularly important one because it sits at the junction of 3 continents and several climatic zones. So our flora, our fauna, our biodiversity is incredibly rich because we have the northernmost species of the African continent, the westernmost species of the Asian landmass, and the southernmost species of the European continent. So that's why we have an extra need, and we need to make the extra effort to protect biodiversity here in this tiny little country in Israel. Israel's very dense, it's very developed, it's very diverse ecologically, and all of that together makes for a rich environmental scene, but also a real challenge. We're threatened by the development pressures that everybody's threatened by. It's just that Israel's birth rate is higher than any country in the West. We're already denser than almost every country in the West, and we're a tiny country. To my American audience, I say we're the size of New Jersey. I don't know where that puts us in the UK, but we're a very small country.
The size of Wales, they say in the UK.
Oh, the size of Wales. Somebody told me that once. Yes. Well, there you go. Size of Wales, and the climatic zones that we have here mean that we're a microcosm of many countries, particularly in the Middle East and places where climate change is the pace of climate change is quickening. And Israel and countries at our latitude in the Middle East are heating up at even a faster rate than the global average. And so what I want to talk about for just a couple minutes now is the whole system of water. And, you know, if I talked to you 15 years ago, we would be bemoaning Israel is running out of water and we're under massive pressure to, you know, not water lawns and you know, save water at every turn. But what Israel did starting 20 years ago and really picking up the pace in the last decade is desalination. And we take seawater, we turn it into fresh water. It takes a lot of energy, but energy we have and can produce, but water we can't. So fresh water we can now. And what's happened is that Mikorot, the national water company, and the other regulators in Israel that have invested in desalination, and we have 5 desalination plants working in the Mediterranean now, building one more, and we're building one in Aqaba, in the Gulf of Aqaba for Jordan. What that has allowed is it's changed our whole, it's made Israel not, there's no shortage of water in Israel. We have a surplus of water in Israel, which means 2 things. One, we're selling water to Jordan now, which helps in terms of neighborly relations, and we are we have a green-blue deal going on. Gidon Brumberg, some of you may know, a prominent environmentalist, founded EcoPeace Middle East. He told us in detail about a deal which he really has been fostering and working for a long time, where we're selling water, fresh water to Jordan, and they're building solar panels in their desert. They have much more desert than we have, and it's closer to Tel Aviv, closer to our sources than actually we are. If they build in the deserts just east of Amman, getting that electricity to Israel, to the center of Israel where it's needed most, is no more expensive than getting it from the Negev. So solar panels in the Jordanian desert, and we give them fresh water. And the other thing that allows us to do is, in crazy, you know, if you learned a little Zionist history, you learned how important the national water carrier was, built in the 1950s to carry fresh water from the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, Israel's only source of fresh water, to the center of the country where everybody's thirsty. This year, the reverse is happening, where the Mikorot is going to be sending desalinated water back up to the Kinneret. Actually, we're lobbying for them to dump it in the Jordan River just north of the Kinneret, let it flow through the Jordan, flow into the Kinneret. When the water level of the Kinneret stabilizes, that means 2 things. It means, one, ecologically, that's much better for the Kinneret and its biodiversity than ever has been. The fact that Kinneret's really low and it goes up and down over the years, depending on rainfall, is terrible. We can now re-engineer, play God on the Kinneret and keep the water level at its appropriate height. And that means that we can open up the dam at the bottom of the Kinneret and let water flow into the Jordan River, which is the only thing that's going to save the Dead Sea and the Jordan River. The Jordan River is currently a creek, barely a creek by Western standards. And in the next few years, that may change, and there's hope on the horizon for the Dead Sea. If we can rehabilitate the lower Jordan and have water flow into the Dead Sea, that'll be really important for us. Why are we not moving forward? Okay, you know, in terms of eco-innovation, Israel, Netafim company in the Negev desert that invented drip irrigation, you know, a very fortuitous thing. A guy in the 1950s saw that one plant was growing much bigger than all the others in a line of plants, and he found out there was a leak, and hence drip irrigation was invented, changed the world. They're working on drip irrigation 2.0 right now. We are pushing, you know, Israel basically invented photovoltaic electricity from the sun, and then the guys that invented it moved to California because of the regulatory environment in Israel in the 70s. Took us a long time to catch up with solar fields, but now we've turned the corner. I don't know if you know, but the city of Eilat and the entire Arava desert, the southern Negev desert, is supplied during the daytime 100% solar electricity it runs on, and you know, that's just a model for the rest of Israel, and we're finally moving. But we in SPNI want to protect the open spaces that we have on the ground, and first we believe that every roof that could have solar panels should have solar panels. To talk a little bit about what SPNI does specifically, or through that, talking about what the way environmental protection works. And, you know, first of all, we're rooted in science. It's such an obvious thing, but so much of the weird polarization going on in the world today is that part of the political spectrum seems to be not really based in science and not really using science as a basis for decision making. in the era of fake news or in the era of post-truth. But we can't abandon the science. Our applied research, citizen science, getting school kids and educational institutions and people of all ages involved in things like bird counts and environmental surveys locally. Very important for us. And of course, we use this to do advocacy, to write laws, to let decision makers know how best to protect the environment. Urban nature is one of the most important things we're doing right now. Israel is a densely urban country. 90% of Israelis live in cities. We used to think of nature as someplace out there, John Muir of the American West, the cathedrals of the redwoods that you would go and pray in them, and then, packing up your car to drive to nature. We believe nature needs to be in cities. Not just is it a boon to biodiversity, and on little patches of urban land, biodiversity can thrive, but for people need to be able to have nature walkable, and not manicured parks per se, but the Gazelle Valley in Jerusalem, which I think Jonathan just visited, and I highly recommend anybody on their next visit to Jerusalem to be in touch with us, and we'll arrange for you a tour there. Gazelle Valley in Jerusalem it's technically a park of the city of Jerusalem, but it's really a urban nature site where we breed gazelles, return them to the wild. Gazelles and people coexist. Gazelles have a little rope it's an inner core, and people can't go past that rope. And they actually, believe it or not, we've taught Israelis to not go past ropes and also to leave no trace. They take out the garbage they bring in, but the gazelles wander all around, and we rescue turtles there as well. And fascinating area of biodiversity right in the heart of Jerusalem. We've worked so far with 150 municipalities in Israel out of Israel's 270 municipalities, where we go into the towns and we do very in-depth urban nature surveys. We let mayors of cities know, and the city councils know what nature they have in town. They mostly didn't even know it. And we're talking about mammals like jackals and caracals and hyenas that live in cities. Sometimes of course, boars in Haifa we know about, but all kinds of little areas that we, help local residents understand, and then we can help the cities develop them and maintain them, and especially make them accessible to people. One of the most important things about Israel's biodiversity is the fact that we are on the bottleneck of the global migration fly route. Most of the birds of the Eurasian landmass kind of funnel right over a little tiny space of Israel-Palestine, the Jordan Rift Valley there, because they don't want to fly over the desert on one side and the Mediterranean on the other side. They fly right over little Israel on their global migration route twice a year, 500 million birds each direction. And it is incumbent upon Israel, also because we've signed international charters, but also because of moral people who care about biodiversity in the world, keep this fly route safe and secure from hunting, of course. And there's a lot of hunting of birds that goes on in the Middle East, but not in Israel. And but especially to keep enough wetlands, stopover sites where they can stop and rest and refuel. And to that end, we have created a program we call Startup Nature. And this is our contribution to innovation in the last few years. We are rewilding fish ponds, which are becoming, once fish ponds were, up until very recently, fish ponds were a huge mainstay of kibbutz economy in Israel. There are 300 kibbutzim in Israel, and many of them have fish ponds. And most of these fish ponds are sitting on Israel's historic wetlands. The reason we have to go on offense instead of just protecting nature in Israel in terms of the wetlands is that 95% of the wetlands that existed in Israel 120 years ago before Zionism, 95% of those wetlands are gone. They've dried up, they've been used up, they've been built over. Climate change has lessened them, but many of them, perhaps as much as 30% of all the wetlands in Israel, are now underneath fish ponds, whose aquifer, the rivers and aquifers and springs of these areas of Israel have become intensive fish agriculture, which uses incredible amount of water, turns the water full of pesticides and antibiotics, and is terrible for nature. And now the fish ponds are failing economically, and we're really worried that if we don't do something, all of these, the wet areas, which serve as a very partial stopover sites for some birds, even they will disappear as they put up infrastructures, buildings, and solar panels, floating solar panels on this water. And so we're saying, no, we have to turn them into nature reserves in perpetuity. We did this already at one kibbutz on the Jordan Valley, Kfar Rupin. It was flooded it was turned about 2 years ago, we opened it as a nature reserve and not as a fish pond. And we saw 85 species of birds within 2 weeks. Over 220 species of birds have been seen there up to now. Mammals and birds and butterflies and reptiles and amphibians are coming back. And we have a vision. We're opening our second site at Kibbutz Magan Michael this year. And we have a vision to really rewild, hopefully 30% of the 200,000 acres of wetlands that Israel had 120 years ago. We hope to rewild 30% of that. According to the UN, we need to, preserve 30% of every kind of unique habitat in every place. And if we can preserve 30%, that will maintain biodiversity and that will slow climate change, because healthy habitats are carbon storage areas. And other than rainforests, wetlands do this better than any other place in the world. They store a lot of carbon on the water and under the water and in the water in their biomass. Once the Zionist prerogative was drain the swamps, that was a folly, and the new prerogative is rewild the swamps. And we think that's one of the most important things going on environmentally in Israel and in the Middle East today. We work cooperatively with our neighbors. Environment Knows No Borders. We have an incredible project where we use barn owls as biological pest control for farmers on both sides of the Jordan River in the Jordan Valley. We've expanded this to several countries around the Middle East and have tens of thousands of nesting boxes. Usually former IDF ammunition boxes, wooden boxes about this big, put them on poles, and the owls inhabit them and eat like dozens of rodents every day per owl. It's been a great, effective project. Popes and presidents have praised it. Talked about putting solar panels on rooftops, particularly on industrial buildings, school buildings. Kibbutzim are putting them all on all of their farm buildings. And we think it alone can provide up to 15% of Israel's total energy needs going forward. And that's just, a brief overview of some of the stuff we're doing in Israel. We want to be an environmental beacon of hope to the world. I'm not sure we're being any other kind of hope for the world at the very moment, but environmentally, the urgency can't stop for anything. And as I've been telling a lot of people from the States, I've been meeting in Israel over the last week. Everybody's here for the 75th birthday celebrations and things, and whatever you've supported in Israel in the past, in the world of, humanitarian support, disability rights, culture, and especially environment. These are things that doesn't depend on the government of Israel or the policies the government, it depends on them, but all of these things support the people of Israel and the land of Israel, the nature of Israel. All these things are crucial. Crucial going forward for healthy life on this planet and healthy life in the Middle East. So
thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you
That's a
very much.
fantastic presentation. And I think the barn owls nesting boxes being made out of IDF ammunition boxes is the contemporary view of turning our spears into plowshares. We've just got 4 or 5 minutes. So any questions, please put in the chat. There's a question about knowing a little bit more about the Hula Valley. And a question, was it to reduce malaria, and is that still an issue? So Jay, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I'm happy to answer. I'm happy to take that question. I answered today. Let me blow up another myth that we were all taught as a young Zionists, which is that we drained the hula to stop malaria. The truth is that healthy swamplands are not a source of mosquitoes. Healthy swamplands have no more likely to be full of malaria than anywhere else. And Israel learned very early on, already in 1929, the British mandate in Israel was sending delegates to an international conference in London on malaria to discuss their successes already by 1929 in channeling swamps, making them healthier, and getting rid of mosquitoes. Malaria had been largely obliterated in Israel by the 1950s when the swamps were drained. The last case of malaria was recorded in Israel in 1961. They drained the one lake in Israel. We call it a swamp. It was the Hula Lake. They drained that freshwater lake to create farmland for kibbutzim. And as anybody who's ever drained a swamp can tell you, all over the world, that's not great farmland. And thank God the hula became the birding spot that it is, because now that whole area of the Galilee lives on the tourist dollars that go there. And our goal is to make sure that those tourist dollars don't disturb the nature, that tourism only supports nature and doesn't ruin it. So, and that's what we want to do with our wetlands all over the place.
I've very much appreciated visiting the Hula Valley, and also maybe you just say a word about the birding station situated between the High Court, the Supreme Court, and the Knesset in Jerusalem. Because alongside the Gazelle Valley, there's a wonderful example of urban nature.
Absolutely. It's called the Neely and David Jerusalem Bird Observatory. It's a community nature education and research site. Generations of young Jerusalemites have become volunteers there and learned to become bird ringers. It's just a tiny place. It's an acre and a half. It's very special. It rubs right up against the backside of the Knesset. We have a tiny little pond there. It attracts hundreds of species of birds. You know, it's almost terrible to say this about something that's an acre and a half, but if you know about the Central Park effect in New York, you know, birds are flying over this heavily, you know, urbanized area, and all of a sudden they see Central Park. Well, somehow that little tiny acre and a half in the center of Jerusalem has that effect as well. We have perfect little wetlands for them, and we attract them with various little, you know, bird treats on trees and stuff like that. The trees that we plant. Highly recommended. We do bird ringing there and been doing it for 27 years now. Again, if you're in Jerusalem, please let us know, and we'd love to host you, show you some bird ringing up close, and the kids that enjoy those places. Very special. Thank you, Rabbi.
Jay, thank you. I'm going to thank you, and do support the SPNI. We'll be in London. We'll be privileged with Yoav, one of the key members of it, visiting Yoav Perlman in July. And we'll be having meetings with him, visiting the birding center in Jerusalem, Gazelle Valley. It was a wonderful part and a kind of healing part of my recent visit to Israel. And as you say, you work with all sectors of society for the future of everybody. And I really, really appreciate your joining us today. It also marks the start of a real relationship between the SPNI and JTree and the Eco-Judaism project here. So more about that. There will be more about that in the future. Angelina has just put the link to the SPNI's website in the chat. A very big thank you, Jane. We appreciate also it's not the most clement hour. It's 2 hours later in Jerusalem. So thank you. We're going to move to Shiri now yes. Thank you. I think we're all appreciating. Thank you very, very much. And to be continued, to be repeated. We're going to move to London now, to Finchley. It turns out Shiri and I live around the corner from each other. There's numerous local projects that you're involved in. You're originally also from Israel. You've been here 11 years and got involved in Eco Show and Tell, in publishing particularly sustainable educational material for children, in Barnet Friends of the Earth, in bees, in planting. Well, you're going to tell us what you do locally. And I think for people who are not local, I'm not sure how local Vancouver and Johannesburg are, this is a model for what we can do. And that motto, think global, act local, is really, really apt for all of us. So Shiri, over to you, and I'm very grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think I have Angelina sharing my my slides. So at the moment I can't really see them, but how about everyone else? Can you see your slides? Can I see?
Yes.
Okay, great. We're starting. So I'm here after talking after Jay, which represents the longest standing environmental NGO in Israel, 70 years of operation. And here I am to talk about completely new projects, which hopefully will give some value to you as well. I will talk about 2 projects that I'm currently heading. One of them is the Eco Show and Tell. These are sustainability fairs. And the other one is a pollinator project here in Finchley. And these are 2 new projects. So the value I hope to offer you today, Angelina, you can move to the next slide, if it's okay, is first of all, just to hear about a little bit about the project, because perhaps you would like to do something similar in your communities. And I will also try to perhaps learn a few do's from starting a new project. And perhaps if any of you are thinking about starting something, so hopefully I will convince you to just go for it and not necessarily aim for perfection, because we are having a climate emergency. So time is definitely of an essence. So let's talk a little bit about the Eco Show and Tell. So the Eco Show and Tell are sustainability fairs that we carry here in Barnet. Angelina, we can move to the next slide, if that's okay. And basically, we go to high streets in different areas of Barnet. I have to say to the international audience that Barnet is a borough in North London. It is the second largest borough in London, and it has 400,000 residents. So it's quite a big borough. And what we do as a group, we go into the high streets. These are the main roads or the town centers, if you would like, of different wards, different neighborhoods around Barnet. And we hold a fair. So we have stalls, usually about 15 stalls, but these are not commercial enterprises. So it's not about selling your bamboo plates and your sustainable cotton tote bags. It really is about education. The stalls are manned by community groups and by eco-conscious residents, and they're just there to talk about the things that they've done. So for example, if someone created a wildlife pond in their backyard, then they are there to answer questions and to show some how they've went about it. If someone created a meadow in their backyard, or if a group is very passionate about cycling, they will talk about that. And the reason we are on the high streets is basically it's a type of intervention, is to be able to reach an audience that wouldn't necessarily follow the content that's available on social media or on YouTube, and people who don't actually go and search for the information. I think we can all agree that there is so much information online, but it's about actually actively searching for it. And that's why we are a physical, in-person initiative on the high streets where people go out for shopping and things like that. And the other thing is that there's a lot of judgment, and people can feel quite judged when they talk about their habits. And that's why having neighbors to talk one to another in a friendly manner and zero judgment way, in warts and all sort of manner, is really helpful to give information to people. People also feel more comfortable knowing that we're not selling anything. So there might be sales like local honey, for example, or a plant sale, or maybe someone taking donation for their project, but there isn't really a massive fair that sells all sorts of like expensive goods. And if we move to the next slide, the project is new. So it started 18 months ago. If it's okay to move to the next slide. So we started 18 months ago. That's a year and a half ago, really. The first one, if you can see at the top picture, this is in my front yard, in my own house. I just basically called it Eco Show and Tell, went into my neighbors in the street, knocked on the door and said, would you want to come, in 1 week's time? I want to talk to you about composting, and two of my friends are going to talk about these other issues. And people actually came. And the last one that we did is the bottom picture a few months ago in Middlesex University. That's the biggest educational establishment that we have in the borough. It's a really, really beautiful, well-respected, posh place to hold a fair. So I'm just mentioning that not to boast, hopefully, but it's just to show you that actually in a short amount of time, we can reach and improve quite a lot. The project has already also been funded twice, once by the council and the second time by our local waste authority. And the project is also in demand. So we've managed to do 8 fairs so far, and we've been funded to do 6 more, and they are already fully booked. And so we are now in a position where we need to say no to fairs if they seem to be too small, and things like that. So I'm not claiming necessarily that we are hugely successful. And the reason I'm not saying that is just it's too early to judge. But at least we are in demand, and it's deemed useful enough to get funding. So if we move to the next slide, please. We have, for example, an event coming up next month in Hendon under the Urban Tree Festival banner, which is a national festival celebrating all things trees. As you know, trees take a huge amount of carbon from the air. They are of growing importance, and the need to celebrate them, to understand them, and to discuss the best way of going about it has taken national interest for a long time, but it seems to be gaining even more attention. But you can see in the slide a typical event. We will have a repair shop, so someone to maybe sew some clothes or to teach how to sew, the knee areas that always gets, kids always seem to tear that area. We have the solar panels guy, we have the cycling group, we have local honey, we have someone to talk about food waste. So we really managed to gather all these different people in the community locally, that's micro-locally. So if we're going to Hendon, we will have at least 5 groups based in Hendon to talk about the local nature, the local initiatives. So if you're local, we really hope to see you in Hendon, but that's just an idea also to give you a bit of a flair of how a sustainability fair like that looks like, and the type of groups that you might want to invite to the fair. You can invite the local milkmen and things like that. So if we move to the next slide. So in my opinion, really, before you start a project like that, you need to lay a little bit of foundations. So for example, for me, that means, and it might be something different for you for the project that you've started, but for me, first of all, it means to connect with as many people as I possibly can locally. And to me, that means things like local community groups, local organizations, the council, understanding who in the council is relevant to your project. Anyone on social media, so Facebook groups, Nextdoor app groups, just following a lot of people, but also reaching out and making these connections. If you feel like on social media in your area, in your community, there aren't actually these kind of groups on social media, why not create one? So that can be on Facebook. If you feel like there isn't like a sustainability group dedicated to your neighborhood, you can be the one to create that group and start inviting people. The next thing is to share. So if you have any idea about your project, talk about it with as many people as possible. Don't keep it a secret. The whole idea is for people to know about it, but it also helps to focus you, and people will ask you difficult questions. And I think you will come out of the sharing sort of period with a better understanding of what you can do and how you can achieve it in the most efficient and quick way. And then you need to create, or at least I felt like I needed to create a few bits and bobs that helped me then reach out to more people and actually achieve my goals. And these are things like give a name to your project. Is it a local branch of an existing project, or is it something completely new? You need to create an email. I needed to create an email address, so I've just, and an email list. So that can be, Excel, or it can be a MailChimp, but some sort of a list with people that you know and their emails, so you understand your network and you don't just, try to remember each time who should you contact, but so you make some sort of a list. A logo, it can be a very simple logo, and some sort of social media presence. And that is also the order, right? Because if you don't have a name, then it's difficult for you to create a social media account. If you don't have a logo, again, it's difficult to do that. So in my example, Angelina, if you can kindly move to the next. So I thought, you know, I want to do something. I joined our local Friends of the Earth. I also joined a lot of Facebook and Nextdoor groups, things like Sustainable Finchley, Sustainable East Finchley, Sustainable Barnet. I realized there wasn't a Sustainable Barnet group on the app Nextdoor, which is quite big here in the UK. So I created it. I've joined our local litter picking group. I've joined the council's networking, environmental networking group, and I've started to meet my neighbors. So it was really always really helpful. I shared my idea, and to be honest, it was much more complex and at the beginning, and it really helped me to focus and to understand that, you know, we can actually just do simple fairs. People like fairs, people are nosy, they want to see what's going around, and that was really helpful. It was also helpful to understand in this way who else is active, and it again really helped me. In terms of the all the little bits and bobs, I use Gmail, free account. I use MailChimp to create a page and lists, Canva to create logo, Eventbrite to do things like webinar, and Excel lists for everything else. And my key, let's say, sorry, it's not my key, but the next stage is then to just start. So that would be the next slide, Angelina. The way to start for me was to just run a small event, because no one will remember this event. It doesn't have to be a huge event. It can be a webinar. It can be a small in-person meeting. But once you have a name and you had an event, now you have a thing. You have an initiative. So it can be a launch meeting. It could be in person. And in terms of the next thing that you can do is try to get some funding. If you can do some form of group structure, you can think about, you know, are you going to be a community group? Are you going to be a company? What are you going to be? And once you know that, you can then apply to a bank account, because if you really are trying to do something that will have an impact, then you will need some funding, even it's $500 or £500, you will have some expenses. Once you've had your event, you get some funding, you basically repeat, you do more of event, you know, you do more events, you do them better, you grow your connections, you have more infrastructure, and yeah, you just go about it. So I'll just tell you about my experience in the next slide. So as I said, I started from a very small event. I just invited my neighbors to my front yard. By then, as I said, I was a bit more better connected, so I knew who to invite to speak at that event. And we had 10 neighbors show up. But that allowed me to say, I'm Shiri, I do the Eco Show and Tells, and this is what I do. And it helped me to apply for funding. And I got the funding based on that event. And then we just repeated the same idea, but we did it a bit bigger because now we had funding. And so from 3 speakers at the first event, we now have 15 stalls. We have more infrastructure, more social media. And what I want to say is that we're new, so we're not there yet. We don't have, for example, a website, but I think part of the magic is to just start and to grow. We just got £400 funding to create a website. So sometimes in the next year or so, we're hoping to have a website giving some, like a blueprint on how to run a sustainability fair. So we're hoping to do that. And the day-to-day of the event and the event management is, first of all, I usually need to put a fair together. So I need to usually find a co-organizer. So like someone maybe in the council who can help, who's responsible for a certain area in Barnet and who can help me get the license to hold the fair there. But there's also a lot of logistics. There's, you know, like getting the tables, sorting out where the toilets are going to be and do a raffle pack. So there's a lot of logistics like that. There's marketing, so I usually put a quick email together to send to all my contacts. I put information on social media, and there's leaflets and posters. But I also ring, the local groups. For example, I will call all the schools and say, this is happening next month. I will try to call the synagogues, the churches, and can you put this information in your newsletter? So I will try to do as much as I can with my limited time. And usually I also need to report the results after each event. So that was the Eco Show and Tell, a quick whistle stop. If we move to the next slides, I will talk quickly about the Finchley Pollinator Project before we take some questions. So if we move to great. So the Finchley Pollinator Project is very local. It's in Finchley. It doesn't even cover the entire Finchley. It doesn't cover East Finchley. It covers West, North, South, and Center. And the initiative is all about pollinators because they are declining. I probably don't need to go too much into detail on that, but if we don't have pollinators, we lose our plants, including trees, including fruits, including vegetables, including just beautiful plants, because pollination creates seeds. So pollination is basically the male, in a way, it's the male bit, and the babies of the plants are the seeds. If we don't have seeds, we are in big trouble because once our plants die, we don't really have a way to get new ones. So we definitely, no matter whether we are in an incredibly urban place like London or a farming community somewhere in California, pollinating almond trees as a main industry, it doesn't really matter. We don't have pollinators, we don't have seeds. So it's a big, big project, and in terms of the importance, and I think every neighborhood should have a pollinator project. The aim is to provide foraging, so that's plants, as well as nesting, and that's shelter for our local pollinators population, but also to bring the community together and, to provide all these mental health benefits that are associated with gardening. It's even a newer project. So Angelina, if we move to the next slide, please. And it's even newer, it's less than a year old. We've started with a Zoom, like a video launch meeting. So that is the first thing that we did. We've just, I've put some messages on social media. I said, this is happening. We have this meeting. And the idea of the meeting was just to generate ideas. And people were able to raise their hands and say, let's do a photo competition, let's do this and that. The project is also funded. So we started with a crowdfunding campaign to our local a local community, and we got some funding from the council as well. And it's quite in demand. We managed to do 2 initiatives, including bulbs, an autumn bulbs project, pollinator-friendly bulbs, and a local project. And our current project, we have 19 community spaces in Finchley that have signed up to get plants from us. And so we're using funding that we got from a retailer called Waitrose in the UK. And they gave us a check for some funding. And we're paying people locally to grow from seed some plants for us, and we will give these plants to community spaces like synagogues, like churches, like schools, like elderly care homes, and other places. We also do webinars because we found a local horticulturist. I will show her face in a minute because she's wonderful. So we are doing webinars as well, just to provide some upskilling gardening skills to our local neighbors. So Angelina, if you can show the next slide. So this is our small team. We have on the right, we have Dina J. Kastenbaum. She's a member with Rabbi Jonathan's synagogue, which is new North London synagogue. On the left, we have Alison Sharp, and in the middle, we have myself and a lovely Waitrose employee. And somewhere there, you can see a small check that was very helpful for us. So if we move to the next slide, our day-to-day is really deciding what sort of initiative we will go for. and we try to go for something that's season appropriate and so also manageable in terms of our resources. We then go about marketing it and sending a newsletter, putting some information on social media. We're trying to reach out to umbrella organizations like pollinators in Pollinating London, also national pollination organizations. We grow a lot of plants, and and we buy things like trowels. We get donations of like plastic pots from other community groups. And when we run the events, it's really about, some of it is just like writing slides for webinars. We need to schlep a lot of compost to our events. We need to create workstations where people can plant. And again, we need to report the results. So if we go to the next slide, these are just what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm growing some of our plants for a local, for our current project. You can see that it's getting a standing ovation from my cat. But all of our plants are started from seeds, so that ensures that we can grow them peat-free. I'm quite sure you know that using a normal compost that is not peat-free is quite harmful, because the peat is a beautiful bogland that stores a lot of carbon. So if you are buying compost, which is soil basically, make sure that it says peat-free. Yes, and we're growing everything from seeds, and you can see everything like that. It's just my small wildflower seeds turning into small seedlings and then being uppotted to small pots before they will be ready to be planted by the community. And the last slide is planting a tree, just to bring everything together. In the Urban Tree Festival, trees are fantastic. Some of them are fantastic, provide so many flowers in one bloom. So if you compare it with a small plant versus a tree that has a huge bloom, there are some really, really wonderful trees suggestions, such as pussy willow. If you could Google online, if you just follow this link, for Friends of the Earth bees, they give some really wonderful suggestions for trees and shrubs you can grow for different pollinators, and also they give an idea about when to plant what. So I would highly recommend this resource. So I'm happy to take your questions now.
That was a fantastic talk, and like Jay's, but also gives a model as to what one can do, the art of the possible in a neighborhood. And the initiative you're taking, it's really, really, really inspiring. A very big thank you. Let's see if there are questions. I hope that is it possible for people to have access to some of your slides? Is that all right with you?
Oh yes, absolutely. What I'm hoping to that with the help of Angelina to share is the slides. We've also done last night a webinar that gives practical beginner skills, gardening skills, such as growing from seed and also taking cuttings. So very cost-effective ways to get a lot of plants for almost free. And I hope to share that as well as some other links.
Mm-hmm. Can I want to ask, we just got about 5 minutes left, so please put a question in the chat if you want to ask. I want to ask, you said it's very important that people don't feel judged when they come to the fest. Can you just elaborate on that? Because that seems to me very significant, because yeah, people do worry about virtue signaling, they worry about feeling condemned. Yeah.
I think because we are in a state where I think a lot of us know that it's not good to use plastic, it's not good to do this, and it's not good to do that. But the state of things is that if you go to a big supermarket, it's very hard to actually find things that are eco-friendly. People are very short on time, and so our people don't preach in a way that makes people feel small and make people feel like they're not doing enough, or because of them the planet is doomed. So we do try to share our own experience and to emphasize and explain, like, to be true about the fact that some things, some behavior change sometimes take a bit more time, and how we manage it. So for example, I say, well, in my case, sometimes my children are teenagers. So when I'm really precious for time, I send one of them to get the loose fruit and vegetables, because it does take a little bit more time at the till to weigh all these different fruits and veg, compared with just grabbing a packaged fruits that already has a scan barcode on it. So which takes really a second. So it's important to acknowledge these difficulties, the time crunch, maybe the cost crunch, maybe the fear of making a mistake, acknowledge them, and then say, how did I go about it? And also admit that it doesn't always, it's not always possible, that yes, sometimes I do go and I have literally 2 minutes to pick up something for dinner, and Waitrose is right there, and I need to grab a pack of tomatoes, I will do it. So we're not trying to take sort of like, a holier than thee approach. And again, acknowledge again and again how that it is difficult, but it is necessary. And even something small, just starting and doing it from, when you do have time, a little bit is much better than doing nothing. And a bit of imperfect action done by many is much better than perfect action done by few.
And that done by many, I just want to emphasize that, because in our community, we've got quite a lot of political leadership and some senior civil servants, and ask what makes an impact in a democracy? And their answer is what people do. Politicians are interested in what a lot of people do. And if a lot of people begin to change their habits, then the economic world and the political world will have to respond. So thank you. There's one more, just looking at the chat. Angelina's reminded us that the JTree site now records all planting projects, because we inspire one another. So we also have a part on the site, which is not just about things you have planted, but our own, some people have an allotment or the opportunity to plant 1 or 2 trees, and some people are lucky enough to plant hundreds. So please record them, because you'll inspire somebody else. I think we're coming to the close. So I'm going to thank you. That was fantastic, Jay and Shiri. Very different perspectives, extremely important. And I look forwards. Please use the initiatives to engage with SPNI, to create local groups. There's a real blueprint in what you said, Shiri. And let's keep working for the future of this beautiful earth. The aim must be to give to our children's children a world more beautiful and more biodiverse and more sustainable than the one we were born into. A big thank you to Angelina for drawing everything together for today. That was not simple, and much appreciated. And please follow Eco-Judaism, and please follow JTree, and look out for groups like your group, Shiri, in Finchley, and wherever you're in the world, for local groups, and look out for SPNI's work across Israel and inspiring other countries, and the fact that it works for the whole of the populations of the region. Erev Tov, a very big thank you to everybody, and good night, especially good night in Israel where it's jolly late.
Chag Sameach, Earth Day.
Chag Sameach, Earth Day. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Toda.
Thank you very much. And just to say,